Assalamu alaikum.
Hey.
I am Al-Hajj Talib Abdul Rashid.
This is it.
The Muslim Islamic Brotherhood
Someone's watching TV.
Hello, John.
Let's, okay, now we go. There we go. I unmuted Dami. I'll unmute Ed, our two co-hosts for the last evening. Hey, guys, how's it going?
Doing good.
Going well. Going well.
What do you think? We just saw Joe give his big speech. What did you think?
Well, let's see. This is me and my wife said the last thing said, it comes from the heart. Old Uncle Joe, he's, you know, he's a funky old dude. He's like your old uncle, you know, but it's like, he's like, it's real with Joe. That's the thing with him. I mean, it's the real deal. And he may not be the perfect guy, especially for younger progressives, older progressives, etc. But if you know when he's speaking, it's the real deal. And all you got to do is listen to his life story. You know, he's had it. I mean, he's not some guy who's like born with a silver spoon. So, Ed, what do you think?
What did you think?
Oh, absolutely. You know, Joe's been around a long time, and yeah, his story is powerful. I actually first met Joe not long after his family was killed in a car accident.
Oh.
I was actually working. I was just a young upstart with a mind that was just nothing but a sponge for learning everything. But I was working for a congressman who was one of his very good friends. We were out campaigning on a road, long stretch of highway between two cities, walking the length and the breadth of the district. And as we were walking along the road, a car pulled up. This man got out, and the congressman introduced me to this is the new Senator Joe Biden, and then later told me his story, and I've never forgotten that. And in the years that followed, he was always, my boss was always telling me that Joe was probably the nicest, most decent man on the whole hill.
Yep.
And that just went on for years and years and years. And so what we heard tonight, I think was just a continuation and proof of that this is a very good and decent man, exactly the way Michelle Obama referred to him. And even all of his opponents. So in the Democratic Party and in the Republican Party, all refer to him as probably the most good and decent man on the Hill. And I think that says a lot about what he said tonight. Almost the first words out of his mouth in his speech were, "I'm a proud Democrat." And some of you have heard me offline talk about what it is to be a Democrat. I think if you're going to be a Democrat, you're going to be a Democrat. And Joe Biden has been a Democrat. When he says he's a Democrat, he means he's a Democrat. And there are just no two ways about it.
No.
What that means with Joe is that it's not that we're always perfect, meaning the party is always perfect. It means that we stick together to figure it out. We don't wander. And that kind of teamwork, team effort is what really pushes my button. So,
Great.
You know, I've been a fan of Joe Biden for years.
I think too that, like we're saying, I mean, yeah, he may not be the perfect candidate for a lot of people now in their minds, but for what we need right now, I mean, we need some stability. I mean, we've just gone through the most insane thing possible. I mean, a lot of us here, you know, many of us lived through Reagan, and we thought that was going to be the ultimate worst in Republicans. And, you know, Trump I actually like long for Reagan at this point. I mean, now at this point, I'm like, oh my God, Trump is so insane that I actually think Reagan is good. And I fought all through Reagan's administration against him, right? And I'm like, at least he had some kind of sense or something. Trump is out of his mind. And, you know, Biden is like the complete opposite. Like I said, that's what I say. He's like your old uncle. Like, yeah, maybe, you know, he's a little kooky, says a bunch of, you know, weird things or whatever, but he can bring things together. And, you know, I mean, we just got to get back to something. So it's crazy.
Yeah, well, Reagan gave a really good case for single-payer health care when he was president of SAG. So He does have some Democratic roots in there before he went into politics. But yes, I have to say that, we've been talking over the week about, like you both have been mentioning, about how Biden wasn't necessarily everyone's first choice. But I have to say that, in my honest opinion, this was one of the best speeches I've seen Joe Biden give. And it wasn't necessarily because actually the number one best speech I've ever seen Joe Biden give was at the California Democratic Party a few years ago. And I will tell you that he was still the vice president at that time. And I will tell you that there were Bernie people and more moderate people in that hall, and you wouldn't know the difference in them between the reaction, because everybody had a tear in their eye. That's how good that speech was. Now, this was a different kind of speech. There was not a convention hall. He didn't have the ability to elicit that kind of emotion. But I saw him give a very forceful speech. It was not like in the primary debates where it seemed like, he was a little bit scatterbrained or whatever. He was very practiced and refined on this one. And I thought that he must have gone to the best of the Obama speechwriters for some of this stuff when he was talking about give people light and they will find the way. Trump has cloaked America in darkness for far too long. He was
Well, but John, you're a little young. I mean, like Ed and I knew Biden, and I was a foreign policy person, and Biden was, the head of the Foreign Affairs Committee. I mean, he's a pretty sharp guy. He's gotten older, but back in his day, like it's like even when he was speaking tonight, when he got to foreign policy, when he talked about fighting against dictators and stabilizing NATO and our partners and things like that, you saw. I mean, he clicked in, and on day one, as soon as he gets in office, even more than Obama, he's going to be going over to Europe. He's going to be going back with our allies. The whole rest of the world is going to be like, oh yeah, But then back to your point too about him unifying. Like I noticed it yesterday, actually, when I was watching Bernie Sanders speak. You could see he wasn't just mouthing the words. You could see there was a smile on his face. Bernie, even when he's happy, he doesn't smile too much. You could see he feels comfortable with Biden. And yeah, we didn't, get everything from the aggressive side, but at least, to be practical with everybody, we need to realize that we're in a big country. There's a lot of different parts to it. And us progressives are going to have to live in it. We're going to have to deal with the fact that, the whole nation is set up as a compromise. So, Biden may not be perfect, but it's better than having Trump in. And look what happened before when we tried to be really pure about everything in 2016. Now like what Mike Soloff said, now we have 2 Supreme Court justices we've lost, So Biden, I'm hoping, can bridge that. And if, either he does make it through another term or he's going to be up there training Kamala, and then Kamala's going to be our president in 2024. So that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, Dami, Joe was, or not Joe, but Bernie was on with Stephen later in the evening, and he was the same way. It was all positive. It was all, this is going to work. And if he does what he said, what his groups say to do, he'll be the most progressive president since FDR. And he said the same thing today on C-SPAN. I saw him again.
It's interesting you mentioned that because Biden invoked FDR and him talking about himself overcoming a virus. And he did that right after invoking Obama when he said that we're not a collection of red states and blue states. So Biden was trying to position himself in that pantheon of the Roosevelt, Obama, somewhere in that wing of Democratic great presidents. That's what he's trying to position himself in that speech. I thought that it was, he went through policy at about halfway through. The first half was about character, dignity, and compassion. And then about halfway through, he started switching to talking about policy. I heard him talking about senior issues, protecting Social Security and Medicare, youth
Green jobs.
He mentioned
justice,
climate, gun control, policies geared toward people just starting their career. And then of course he, toward the end of it, came toward what one of the themes of his entire campaign, which is the Charlottesville riots and tying that into his theme for the restoring the soul of the American nation, or the battle for the soul of the nation. And then he ended that by saying, we will find the light once more, tying that back into the poem at the very beginning. I thought that all around, he did a really good job, and whoever wrote the speech for him at least did a really good job of rhetorically hitting on the notes that needed to be hit on, which is he's decent, he's kind, and people who have worked with him, generally speaking, have a high opinion of him.
When it came to that part, when it came like crescendoed up to there, and it just came like about him, about the heart, that's really what, because the other part's like, okay, nice policy stuff, we know, and he's got a great, he does have a great record. I mean, if you just want to look at his record. But yeah, when he said he got to, it's Charlotte. He said that was a wake up, a call to action. I had to run. Silence is complicity, as he said his father had said, and as you said, the battle for the soul of this nation.
Right.
So that's when you get to real historical American kind of rhetoric. That's when we're talking about the heart of America and not just policy. And you can see, like when you see him speaking, that's coming from him. That's coming from his heart. So, I mean, I'm okay. If he gets in, I'm all good.
Yeah, well, that is the thing with Biden, is that he's always been known for being authentic. And we saw that throughout the series of debates. He was the guy who stood on the stage and never ran farther to the left than where he was. He never ran farther to the right than where he was. And he stayed right where his core always has been. Well, let's also remember one thing, that when, as vice president, the one who lit the final fuse for marriage equality.
Yep.
It came from Joe Biden.
I was watching the news that day. I was watching Meet the Press.
That's right.
He was on, and he said, I don't know what the words were, but he said it, and I'm like, whoa, because I know Obama was still sitting there going, well, I'm still thinking about it. Blah, blah.
I think that was a fake gaffe. I think he used the fact that he does gaffes a lot, and he went out of his way to make that statement, which then was a domino effect. Actually, I think one of the second people to do it was actually Hillary. And
God, don't blow the moment. It feels so good. No,
great. No, yeah.
With a big effing deal. I mean, that's the thing. That's Joe Biden. I mean, it's like whether they're like candid. I mean, I don't think they are, but
Right. No,
former board member.
So the guy,
go ahead, Harv. What do you think?
he's seen as a centrist and a moderate, but remember, that is the guy who stood out on the stage and pushed that button.
Yep.
The other thing about Joe Biden is in the events leading up to going after bin Laden, we know that in the Situation Room that night when they were deciding to either go or not go, it came to him and he wanted to wait for more intel. Now, you either might have said, I would have gone ahead with it, or I would have waited for more intel. But the fact is, he wanted to wait a few more moments, however long those moments were, for more intel before pushing the button. And that says two things about Joe. One, he knows foreign policy. Two, he's very cautious. He's not going to throw us into a situation without having thoroughly thought it out.
Right.
And but when the decision was to go, he was all in, and his love for the defense of this country through the military came through in several ways tonight. And in fact, his final sign-off at the end of his speech tonight was God bless the troops. After he said God bless America. That is Joe Biden. And while some may say, oh, is he too hawkish? No, this is a guy, we went after bin Laden. This is the guy who said, can we get more intel before we go? So I think my point there is that I think that his heart and his mind and his courage to defend this country strikes the right balance.
Also, like to add to that too, and this is more for the policy type people in the group, like he's going to be a steady hand. Because the thing is, when Obama came into office, everybody loved him and, all the hope and all that, but the thing is, he was pretty green, right? And they needed Biden. I mean, Biden was like his big brother, like his uncle who came in. And because, I mean, I don't know, how many people, like I have a small business, like we were dealing with the financial meltdown at that time. And we didn't know if America was going into depression. And, Obama, he was new. Biden went up there to Capitol Hill. Biden sat down with everybody. Biden knew all the mechanics of government, which is exactly what we need right now. Right now, we're in a national crisis. We're in something equivalent to World War II, where you need somebody who just knows how to work the machinery of government. Trump does not. Trump doesn't even know anything, right? So you need somebody, whether you like Biden or not, now you need somebody who knows how to steer the ship steady.
That's
and knows how all the mechanics of it. His friends, I mean, I'm sure he can go up to Capitol Hill right now, even with the Republicans, and they all know him.
That's
and he can sit down and be, with McConnell, like, hey, McConnell, let's just work this out. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Listen, he lived to the tip of the needle.
I gotta assert my presidential privilege here and we have a lot of guests to get to tonight.
We're just having such a good time here. So.
We're all waiting, but before we get to the first guest, I saw that our former board member, Hara Beck, had something to say. So really quick, Hara, why don't we hear
It's me, Hara. It was a while back. When I heard about the marriage equality stuff, I thought I heard Obama say, my oldest daughter said that it should be, and therefore I'm going with my oldest daughter. So when I'm hearing Joe Biden said it first, and 3 days later, Obama said it, and I went, oh, really?
Yeah, he got out first in terms of the top.
Who'da love, yeah.
Okay, so
Joe first.
Now let's bring in our first scheduled guest for the evening, the mayor of our home city, Santa Monica, Kevin McKeown. Welcome, Kevin.
Yay, Kevin!
Thank you, John, and everybody. And boy, that has been an exciting 3 days, 4 days actually, but in ways very different from the normal type of excitement of a convention. I think I'll start at the end with the very last quote that Joe Biden chose to use in his speech. It was from an Irish poet named Seamus Heaney, and it was about when a moment comes in history where hope and history rhyme. And I think that in a lot of ways, this convention was all about very special timing. It wouldn't have been the kind of convention it was if not for COVID and the isolation we're all in. But it also couldn't have showcased the incredible strength of Joe Biden in terms of empathy that we saw, because it was an up close and personal kind of convention. By the way, speaking of Irish poets, I'm of Irish descent myself. I have Irish. I'm quite sure tonight that all over Europe, Joe Biden is the most welcome Joe since G.I. Joe. I'll bet there's a lot of very happy people in the rest of the world at the thought that Joe Biden is going to be our next president. I felt so much emotion these last few days. And it wasn't the sort of excited, pumped up emotion that normally happens at a convention. It was different. I realized what was happening. My numbness was lifting. I mean, do you all remember election night 4 years ago? I was up on Montana at the Democratic headquarters, and shit began to fall apart. And I left, and some friends and I drove around looking for another election party where we could at least celebrate something, because a lot of local people I liked won. Everybody had shut out the lights and gone home. And to a large extent, I think all of us found we had to shut out the lights and go home to get through these last 4 years. But we have endured. We've even persisted. And now we get to awaken to the reality that we can do so much more again, if only we put the next 2.5 months into electing Joe Biden. And the question is going to be, do we have the energy to do that? It was a very different kind of energy. I think we do have the energy, but it's a different kind of energy. You think about the typical convention that happens at a turning point in history. 60 years ago, the convention was here in LA at the LA Sports Arena. And it was at the very beginning of the civil rights era. And Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke, and Adam Clayton Powell, a congressman from New York, exhorted us all to keep the faith, baby. And we kept the faith. But then in 1968, we had the convention in Chicago. And that time it wasn't about civil rights. It was about authoritarianism, law and order, love it or leave it. And this time it was us white kids who were in the streets. And on TV, we saw the surging convention crowds with Dan Rather being knocked to the floor. We saw surging demonstrators out in the streets. It was a very energetic convention. Even 2008. Now, I ran to be an Obama delegate in 2008 and didn't quite make it, but I decided to go to the convention anyway. And I got to experience what an amazing thing a national Democratic convention is. And in that case, it was, all about excitement, change, hope, and this wonderfully intellectual centered person who was just the opposite of George W. Bush. And there was all this energy. We didn't see that kind of energy at this convention because of COVID and the way that it had to be put together. But I think we could feel it. I think this time in 2020, instead of talking heads, we had talking hearts. And I think that's why I've been so moved these last few days. Is Joe Biden the man for this moment, like the poem that the hope and history rhyme? Well, Barack Obama said earlier this week that when he looked for a vice president and found Joe, I didn't know I'd find a brother. And I think that that's the sort of personal connection that Joe Biden makes so easy for us. Now, he's 77 years old, and we're in a country that's under a demographic shift. The decisions for the future are continuing to be made by people who won't be here for it. And the people who will be here have much more diverse backgrounds and values. And Joe's a centrist. Full disclosure, I was a Bernie guy from the outset. I think I was the only person on the city council here who endorsed Bernie, and I was Bernie all the way. But tonight, I'm really excited about Joe Biden because of the way he can connect. To connect, we have to learn how to feel and think at the same time. We had a very cerebral president in President Obama. And he also had a lot of empathy, but it wasn't showing on his sleeve like it does with Joe Biden. And intellect is not the opposite of empathy. The opposite of empathy is fear. Well, empathy is our strength, Democrats. Trump has no empathy. All he and his campaign have to work with in 2020 is fear. So would you rather be afraid or be loved? Now, for us privileged West Siders, would we rather be the advantaged few in a society based on fear? Or would we rather be equal participants in a beloved community? I was happy to hear that phrase get used several times tonight alone. So the changes we need, well, they're not just about police or about economics or about the accumulation of wealth and systemic racism. They're also about things that we deal with locally, things like land use, and that's where historic segregation is perpetuated, invisibly maybe, but it's perpetuated. Santa Monica's history, is a good example. We knocked out a Black neighborhood where the Civic Center now is. We took out another Black and brown neighborhood to put the freeway through. I do have a proposal for restorative justice to bring those families back, but the problem is we just don't have enough housing to do it. So what does the inclusiveness and the empathy that was emblematic of this convention tell Santa Monica Democrats we need to do here? What about our zoning? What about our plans for economic recovery and how we can be more inclusive in doing those? The economic collapse actually provides us, I think, not just a local, but a national opportunity. We're going to focus on reinventing Santa Monica. We've talked about that. Well, it's also time to reinvent America. We have the opportunity right now to reboot our institutions and to quite deliberately eliminate those hidden assumptions, those structural barricades against progress for some people. It's time to eliminate racism and discrimination and prejudice. And I think that this is that moment when hope and history rhyme. Now, as progressives, I admit we are, it seems, accepting half a loaf. Joe did not champion all of our issues. So what do we do with our progressive momentum after we win? And I hope and believe that we will win. I mean, when do we get corporate money out of politics? When do we get Medicare for all? when do we get the Green New Deal? Now, Joe talked about the climate and the need to make change, but he's never really embraced the full package of the Green New Deal. If you read today's LA Times, on the inside, on page 2 in the corner, they have a feature called 1,000 Words. That's a photo every day. Today's photo was a picture taken from a ship at the North Pole. First of all, take that in, a ship at the North Pole. Folks, the North Pole is slush. We have gone farther down the wrong way than we could ever have believed, and these last 4 years have been a disaster. Besides making it safe to be black in America, we have to make it mandatory to be green in America. We have to have that Green New Deal. That has to be something that we insist that a Biden administration do for us. California leads the country. Santa Monica often leads California. It's tough. Yeah, we have our setbacks. We've had to delay some of our goals, but setbacks come with effort. I think we're called upon right now in a very special moment when hope and history rhyme to make that effort. And I truly commit to making that effort. I hope all of you do too.
That was very well said. I totally agree. I thought that we saw that personal side of Biden. We saw him talking about his issues, and I was a little bit disappointed on the issue of climate, where we didn't hear the words Green New Deal mentioned at all, and healthcare and some of the other top priorities. But I do feel invigorated and encouraged by what I saw on this speech from Joe, where he was not pretending, he was not lying to us and saying that he was going to do all of that. He was saying, I am going to, in fact, I actually thought the way he worded it, so it almost sounded like a Star Wars reference in some way. He said, I will be an ally of the light, not the darkness. We can overcome the season of darkness in America. And that is very plays into exactly what you're saying. And I think the way that all progressives should be thinking about this election is we have in Joe Biden an ally of the light.
He talked about not being transactional. Well, the good side of that is it's not somebody trying to make a deal with you. I'll buy your vote, like the old Temptation song, Ball of Confusion. Vote for me and I'll set you free. To which the chorus says, rap on, brother, rap on. Joe is not saying, elect me and I'll solve all your problems. Joe is saying, elect me and I'll help enable you to solve our problems together. So that's really a challenge to us.
For sure, yeah. Well, I want to bring in our next guest now, another guest who was a Bernie supporter, and I've been wanting to bring him into the club for a long time, and it's just geographically been challenging. But then all of a sudden, we're in this Zoom situation, and I've had the chance to meet him in person a few times, thankfully, because we used to actually have in-person meetings. And then I got a chance to work with him on some text banking last spring for Christy Smith. So we're glad to have him here. He's the chair of the California Democratic Party Progressive Caucus, Amar Shergill. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be in the presence of any elected official that had the courage to endorse Bernie right from the get-go. They're very poignant words.
Twice. He did it twice.
Fantastic.
So I'm very interested to hear your take on this, and I'm sure that not everybody has seen all the news clips that I've been seeing that you've been posting on Facebook, where you've been, as I said to you in a comment, kind of walking a progressive tightrope where it's almost a challenge in some ways. Kevin just did a very good tightrope walk of how you maintain your progressive credibility, but also being a fierce and strong advocate for doing the right thing and voting for this administration. So what's been your philosophy there? Or how do you look at it after we see this whole convention wrapped up?
Yeah, we can talk about criticisms about the speech or how the speech made you feel, or or the convention. But to answer your question directly, we're in a moment that we have to acknowledge that Trump has to be defeated, and we have to get a Democrat in the White House. and it wouldn't have mattered whichever one of those was, they'd be a better choice than Trump. And it's up to progressive, and especially I feel some burden because I'm chair of the Progressive Caucus, and I'm sure the mayor feels the same way. I'm sure you do as a leader of the club, is that you feel like you need to find the path for progressives, because we have to be honest, there's a number of folks who feel disillusioned. They might not phone bank, they might not text, they might not talk to their relatives in other states. And if that happens enough times, we lose the election, right? And so the path that you were talking about, the tightrope that I've tried to walk, is to provide something for progressives to rely on that will motivate them still. And I think, it's something that, Biden is missed on, is that there's this spirit of debate in the United States that we appreciate, but yet in political circles, we often say, okay, it's all over, time for progressives to be quiet and join the team. But the better path, and the one I've been advocating for, is to challenge Biden while you elect Biden, is that we engage and enliven progressives when we tell them to challenge respectfully while you're also saying we're going to elect this guy. And if we do that, two things happen. One, we keep those people engaged instead of turning off. And two, you're electing Biden, obviously. But the final thing is you're actually getting progressives in the game for the most important thing, which is what happens after the election. Is that we need to continue to build these links and local connections, whether it's Black Lives Matter or March for Our Lives or whatever it is, so that we're ready for immediately after the election. Because at that point, we need the most aggressive and most progressive advocacy campaign the nation has ever seen, so that we don't slump back into comfortable centrism and corporate profit-driven legislation. If we're actually going to fix the problems, whether it's Green New Deal or any of the others, we're going to need a advocacy program that looks a lot like Sunrise and doesn't look like the Democratic Party, because those are the kind of things that move needles, right? The kind of media dynamic and in the streets, on the streets, in your face advocacy that is going to get the job done. You have to make politicians afraid that if they don't get it done, these folks are going to show up in my backyard and I'm going to lose the next election, because that's the only thing they care about. So that's the path that I've been trying to follow. Praise where you can, criticize where you can, and try to bring as many people along as you can. But I'm happy to talk about what happened tonight and over the last few days too.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's a really good perspective, and we've had folks joining us from all across the Democratic tent here. But I'm interested to know what you thought in terms of the speeches and presentation from the convention. Which were the best or most inspiring for you personally?
Tonight was great. It's undeniable. And put aside the policies for a moment, which is hard for any progressive, because we're policy driven. But the speech is good. I'm a trial lawyer, and what we often talk about is it's less important what you say, it's more important how the folks feel, right? How do they feel after they've listened to you speak? When a jury walks back into the deliberation room, how do they feel about me and the case and the client? Because then they will try to rationalize a result which fits how they feel. And I think even the most critical anti-Biden person has to look at this speech and say, he did really well. I mean, and they did a good job leading up to this. If you're one of these political junkies and you've been following along, the introductions, even if you only caught snippets on YouTube or Snapchat or something, they have introduced him in a way which highlights his empathy. And that has always been his strong suit, the personal ability face to face through the camera to empathize with people. And it's real. Putting aside, what he does with that empathy and the policies he creates, that ability to empathize is real. And I think he might even have been helped by the fact that there's no crowd today, so that he could dial down what he's not good at, which is, sort of the crowd busting, the ramping up the crowd. He can do it, but what he's best at is empathizing.
Totally.
And what we saw is a speech which, like you said, talked about darkness and the light. And what I liked at the end, saying that the end of this chapter of American darkness. And he is reaching right into people's souls with that type of discussion about how they feel about where the country is. He's the guy that understands. And he has a family history which gives him the ability to understand you. And he's going to, bring an end to this darkness that a lot of folks feel. And I think he nailed it. He really did.
Yeah.
I think the imposed intimacy of this convention during a pandemic played tremendously well to Joe Biden's strengths, which would be good in itself, except that Joe Biden's strength is also what we need right now in this COVID pandemic. We don't need to be more afraid. We don't need more fear-mongering from Trump. We need somebody who makes us feel safe and hopeful. And God bless him, Joe does that.
Yeah.
And I think we saw it the other day with Michelle Obama too, just sitting there in front of the camera, having a conversation, was probably more powerful for her than if she had had the opportunity to stand in front of a crowd and get the big applause lines. The moment we are in right now happens to be, work well with how the convention played out, and the forced nature or the unique nature throughout the presentation actually underlines the American moment that we're in. Look, the convention's different, the speech is different. Here's somebody, talking to you from their homes. There's Bernie with, a bunch of logs behind him. Everything feels different, and that actually underlines what the problems are right now and what we need to solve.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to get your opinion with regard to the vice presidential pick. And I know that, again, Kamala Harris is someone you've been critical of in the past, but I know that you, are also pretty happy to see as the first South Asian person on the ticket. And yesterday we heard from our member of our college board here, Shai Roy, who's a former president of this club, who was speaking into that sense, after Kamala spoke, how personal that was for him to see that on a national stage. So what's been your thinking about her presence on the ticket?
I'm mixed with her too, the same way I am with Biden. Obviously, we worked pretty hard over the last few months, and you probably saw some of the media work we're doing, trying to get a more progressive person, a strong Black woman progressive, but it didn't happen. For South Asians like me, it is certainly a moment of pride that, we could be accepted. And I'm sure, Black Americans feel the same thing, is that you feel like you're accepted, and there's a certain thread there which goes from, Obama to Biden, and Biden, taking the next step to make sure that there's diversity on the ticket. But, I promised myself I wouldn't go heavy on the criticism tonight, because I understand the moment.
Right.
So there's obviously policy problems which, have been dissected ad nauseum for Kamala. But for Kamala specifically, and for me as a Sikh, my faith-based community as a Sikh, when she was Attorney General, she made some horrible decisions when she was litigating against Sikhs, forcing us to choose between our faith and a job. And, we can talk about the details later, or you can Google Kamala and Sikh, and you'll see some of my quotes and other advocacy. So there's definite problems there. But here's what I also know, and what the quotes I've given to South Asian media and in interviews and satellite and everything else, is that whatever those problems are, certainly she needs to apologize. But the alternative, to think that you might support the Republican ticket, is just anathema to everything that South Asians stand for. So it's not a realistic choice. But that said, I think something in there is missing for Kamala and for Biden, is that they both understand the mistakes they've made, and they've talked about a little bit. But what I think Americans appreciate is folks that atone for what they've done. And I think both of them have an opportunity somewhere during this campaign to have a quiet moment where they talk about that. We saw Obama have a moment like that when he talked about Reverend Wright, and folks knew that, he had some explaining they need to give the American people. And I think if Biden talked about his role in incarceration and Kamala talked about her role, and maybe the Sikh community said something, I think it would make them stronger candidates. I think they'd be more likely to be elected if they took that path.
Yeah, it's good. I'll let her know. Dami, did you have something you wanted to get in?
Yeah, just Amar, thank you for speaking. And what I was going to say is that, I mean, having seen all kinds of presidents all these years, I mean, I think with Biden and Kamala Harris, I think at least for us progressives, I mean, we got to keep our voice up, and I think, but they will listen. I don't think they're going to completely push us out or box us out. I mean, I think we have a good stand there. I mean, especially Kamala. I mean, heard some of her policies might have been great, but I mean, they I don't think they're going to push us off into a corner. And if they do, that's our job. We now have to be just the left of the party and
We saw how it worked under the Obama administration. I think we can probably have some expectation that would look like that, where progressives have a voice in the room, and a lot of time that's not the path that they go down. But comparing that to what we have now, which is they're putting out ads with red upside down triangles saying all political dissidents, making Holocaust comparisons. So, I mean, there's a little different in terms of how they approach progressives.
We also have to look too, we are a federal nation, so we have the whole West Coast, and we should really focus here and make things work here so we become a shining example to the rest of the country, so the middle country isn't afraid of us. If we can make Medicare for all work here in our state, then all of a sudden, Kansas is going to start scratching their head going, they have healthcare in California and they're a bunch of hippie freaks, and, we have it here. I mean, the West Coast is, I don't see the conservatives getting control here anymore. So.
Yeah, that's a great point, is that, we might put together a ton of advocacy in Washington, and then a compromise might be, all right, go ahead, give us the waivers, give us everything we need to put Medicare for all on the West Coast or in California. And, that would be a great success. Progressives are all about incremental change. You're not going to get everything every time. And that's a good way to go. One of the nice things about weather vane politicians is that they put their finger in the air, and the future is ours. The future is progressive. You can take a look at what's happening in Massachusetts right now. Markey has like 70, 80% of everybody under 30, under 40. And folks are looking at that. And you see what Sunrise is doing, the kind of numbers they're putting out for contacts, voter-to-voter contacts. And, politicians look at that. And, that could be to our advantage.
But just make it work. And we have the West Coast, we have the Northeast. I mean, we can pretty much seal up those regions, and then that's it. I mean, the rest of the country can do, okay, well, if Massachusetts.
Don't forget, now we're going to have a vice president who is from California. Mm-hmm. So what we're doing here has a direct line into the highest level of government that it hasn't had before. Even though Kamala Harris may not be all we hope for progressives, it may be that the Rolling Stones had it right. You can't always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you need. And I think that she could be a very useful communication tool. She is so close with our governor, Newsom, that I think the ideas that we try here are going to get a lot more attention than they've ever gotten before in Washington.
That's a good point.
Now I saw that, so the first night we had Mike Soloff asking Suhail Rich a question, and last night Anjali made a point. I see that Janice Schnittman has her hand raised, so why don't we continue the spousal streak. Janice?
Hi. So I just wanted to give some observations I made about the feeling tone of the entire 4 days, especially as it culminated in Biden's speech. I don't think he could have done a better job. I don't know who wrote and orchestrated all of that, but there were little motifs and themes which a lot of people have noticed about the light casting out darkness. Little Easter eggs. I noticed that when John Meacham spoke tonight, that one of the books you could see next to him was about Lincoln. Harold Meyerson said that he thought that Obama's speech last night was the most Lincoln-esque speech that could have been given, and it really was about. He said that when you asked the soldiers what they were really fighting for on the Union side, it wasn't about abolition, but it was about the survival of democracy, the experiment and self-government, that it not perish from the earth was what they felt was at stake. And then Obama came right out and said that. A lot of people noticed how powerfully they kept showing us over and over again that Joe Biden has a lot of empathy. And obviously, when you're comparing that and contrasting it with somebody who is one of the most damaged human beings, I think, who ever walked this earth. Donald Trump not only doesn't have the normal human amount of empathy or a slight deficit, he has none whatsoever. And all that he can speak to is the darkest things inside of our hearts. And as Kevin said, that's fear. Or it can be fear can be mobilized and turned into hatred. There was a lot of sort of mirroring and contrast. Obviously, light contrasts with darkness. One of the things that's amazing about them is there isn't really a symmetry. You can't turn on a little piece of darkness in a room and make it go dark. You have a completely dark room, and the tiniest spark of light changes it in the direction of light, which is something I think we can all take some heart from. To me, the most important thing that Biden was speaking to in us, and that the entire way that whoever put this convention together and had all of this beautiful human quilted faces of who we are as Americans, embracing all of ourselves in all of our variety as brothers, as part of the things that build the beloved community, was maybe there was a little bit of too much of telling us and showing us that Joe Biden is empathetic. But what I really liked was that it was telling us how it feels to think of ourselves as acting out of the better angels of our nature, what it feels like to be acting out of love, resistance, and solidarity together, to use Adi Barkan's words from the other night. And I think that's probably the most important thing that happened in the 4 days. It's not just that we saw what Joe Biden is in contrast with Donald Trump, but that it's what we can be in contrast. I mean, Charlottesville was very interesting because it was people carrying torches in darkness, but it was this hideous, bizarro world negative image of carrying lights to drive out the darkness. So I'm as a progressive, I am coming out of this feeling very, very heartened. I also think of when I look at a phenomenon like this convention or any political speech, I saw the literary themes being refracted and mirrored and repeated very beautifully, rather poetically, culminating in the wonderful quote from Seamus Heaney. But I also see it as, think of it as a rhetorical action. And the art of rhetoric, it's not empty words as some people think it means. Rhetoric means the art of persuasive speech that begins with imagining your audience. And you can't be good at it unless you have enough genuine empathy to be able to put yourself in the position of many other people. And given what a huge, crazy quilt we American people are, I thought a remarkably fine job was done at rising to the rhetorical challenge of tonight, and that we as progressives might not have felt he was talking to us and he wasn't ringing all of our bells. But I think we know that when we have to drive out a fascist from the White House and save our democracy, which is our really, if that window closes, it doesn't open again. I feel very heartened and encouraged, and I also think a lot of people who watched, particularly the people that were on the cusp, the people that the link. I thought there was something very clever, not only about referring to Lincoln, but the Lincoln Project is the Republicans that are saying we cannot vote for Trump, and I think it's very important to make them feel comfortable pulling that lever for Democrats. And I do think that Biden recognizes that the political climate and constraints that he came up under have shifted so dramatically that he has taken on board. A lot of what we heard were things that really we used to hear coming out of Bernie Sanders in his New York, Brooklyn accent, and we would hear from Elizabeth Warren, particularly the finer articulation of these things into actual policy. Biden did have a weakness and he got dinged years ago for plagiarism. I think at this moment, it was very good that he was willing to embrace and almost plagiarize the best ideas that are out there in the party. And they come from we progressives. And with that, I'm pretty happy camper tonight.
Obviously, I know and love my wife, and so I've been trained how to take that as a question. Janice mentioned the theme of light. And that kind of ties back to what I said about the nature of this convention. We all experienced this, not in a crowd, not with standards being pumped, not with loud rhetoric and oratory and speeches meant to be heard by the people in the back aisle. It was all just light on a screen, very close by, very intimate. And I think that is one of the things that I'll always retain from this convention, is that the sense of connection wasn't that of being part of a crowd, all who've gotten pumped up. The sense of connection was the sense of being truly part of. It's one of the reasons, I used to work in radio. I loved radio, partly because I'm very shy, and radio is a way to talk to a lot of people and not have to be in the same room with any of them. But also because in radio, you are talking one-to-one. They call it broadcasting, but there's one person and one listener. And that's the sort of connection I felt we saw tonight. And for all the disparate Democrats across this country to have that intimate personal connection at the same time in August of an election year, I think means we're going to win. If we are willing to put in the work, I think we have now been given the tools and the candidates to be having a really good night on November 3rd.
I totally agree. So before any further ado, I'm really honored to bring in two guests at the same time into the conversation. One is our home Congress member. We know him, Congressman Ted Lieu. And at the same time, we're also going to welcome the next member of the Democratic delegation from California, Christy Smith.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. How are you?
Well, we're so glad to have you both here with us, both of you back. Not the first time for either of you, but the first time immediately after our president accepted the nomination. Now, Ted, 4 years ago, you delivered your speech just a few minutes before Hillary. What's your impression this year, how you're feeling compared to the last time?
I thought the DNC did a fantastic job given the hand that they were dealt, which is basically having no live audience. And they really put together a remarkable 4 days. I thought the speeches by Michelle Obama and Barack Obama were amazing. I thought Julia Louis-Dreyfus's joke about just playing Michelle Obama's speech on a loop on Friday was pretty funny. I thought Biden gave a great speech tonight. And when that Braden, 13-year-old child, delivered his speech through his stuttering, that was pretty remarkable to watch. And I was just thrilled with Kamala Harris's speech yesterday. And all around, I thought this was a fantastic convention.
Totally. And Christy, what did you think?
Yeah, I agree with Congressman Lieu. I think, given the limits of this new era that we're in, with everything being kind of this unidimensional, they really maximized the platform to the greatest possible use. And what I loved about it was I think it answered some of the stark criticism that we've gotten as a party over the last several years, which is, we talk about being reflective of America, but we don't always really reflect America very often in these spaces where it's very media driven. And I think the party really went out of their way to nail that this time. It felt good, and it looked like the diversity of America, and there were multiple views represented, and that part of it felt right. And then I really appreciate chiming into your conversation tonight when I did, because my district here, California's 25th, is kind of a microcosm of where we are in America writ large, right? We've got this solid and growing progressive movement, and more progressive people here than I've ever seen before, and certainly now ones that are willing to be very open and very public about their views. A very entrenched and solid right wing, but then this kind of middle that I, as a candidate, need to reach out to and speak to and address their concerns. But the tools that were in the toolkit of this convention were so much of what all of you were discussing. Whether you come from a much more progressive perspective or a much more conservative perspective, I think there was a lot to be drawn from this notion that our patriotism now in this moment has to be tied to our humanity, to our empathy, to our willingness to extend a hand of friendship and kindness and generosity and charity. And in speaking to the issues that we all care about and framing those in that way, I think it gives us a much greater potential to reach those very voters who might feel a bit more scared, a bit more disenfranchised, a bit more lost than they might be willing to acknowledge, which would draw them to an area of comfort where they would just vote based on what mom and dad always did or what they think the community expects of them. And I think this convention just provided such a fantastic opportunity for us to renew those conversations, as was mentioned here, to really bring in those more progressive voices and help fill out that policy frame in a much more dynamic way, and give us something to build forward on going after, you know, this election in November. I think it really set the stage in a nice way.
Now, Christy, the last time that I saw you was actually one of the last times that I saw anybody, which was your rally for GeoTV weekend before Super Tuesday. And at that rally, we went around, we knocked on doors for you all day. It was my final canvassing shift of 2020. And after that, we went back to the location or the headquarters, and we were joined by the amazing Senator Kamala Harris. And she gave an awesome speech, and it was a very small room compared to, you know, what every room she's ever going to give a speech in for the rest of her career. It was a very small, intimate room. And, you know, what is your thinking now? I mean, you've had her stumping for you on the trail. What do you think that the Biden-Harris ticket means for your election?
Yeah, well, you know, I've never had the privilege of meeting the vice president, but I certainly have with Senator Harris. And my experience with her has always been very similar to the portrait that was drawn of them both over the last few days, is that she is empathetic, kind, caring. She can be in a room of that size or any size, and I've seen her do this before, and really take the hand of someone and focus in on that moment and that conversation, and really deliver and key in on what that person's individual needs are. We need that right now. We need decent human beings leading this country. And so, you know, listen, we are the big tent party, and this was hard fought for all of us through, you know, every bit of the primary, you know, rooting for our candidate, watching as things shifted and changed. But the fact that every single candidate who has been in this race for more than the last year has now come together and said, in this moment, Joe Biden is our guy and Kamala Harris is our gal. That also gives us a lot to go on. I don't know, I can't remember the last time we've had the privilege of that as a party. And I think it's because we all collectively realize that regardless of whatever our internecine squabbles are here within the party, that this greater moment, the greater good and the future of the country really is on the line. So without a doubt, these are two people that, you know, I would have supported from the outset and very happy to support now. But like I said, I also think that the way that they've laid their candidacy out gives us a long runway to take off from, regardless of where we start. So I'm pretty happy.
Me too. Yeah, well, totally. And so now I want to ask Representative Lieu. I mean, you've had the chance to work with Kamala in Washington for the last few years. You know, what has she been like as a partner, as, you know, your Senate partner, and then also looking ahead to imagine her in the White House working with you on legislation in that capacity?
I'm thrilled my friend Kamala Harris is the vice presidential candidate. When I was in the California State Assembly, I was chair of banking. And when I went to the state Senate, I continued working on banking issues. Kamala Harris was Attorney General. And I know for a fact that she got a much better settlement against the Wall Street banks for consumers than otherwise would have happened had she not been Attorney General. It was actually her work, her speaking up, her saying no to their initial settlement, saying we can do better, that actually caused them to, in fact, give a much better settlement for consumers. That's just one aspect I saw of her. I was thrilled to be the first member of Congress to endorse Kamala, and she's going to be a terrific vice president.
Totally. Yeah. Well, I totally agree. I think that, you know, like we were talking about before you came on possibly, but we were talking about, you know, some people were hoping, you know, as it is, you hope for this VP or that VP. And I'm sure, Ted, that you would have been thrilled with your neighbor, Karen Bass, if she had been chosen too. But man, I think that this ticket is a pretty solid. I mean, you know, Dami was talking about this before, but, you know, we get, you know, in our silo of West LA feeling like one thing, but Kamala Harris as a national figure, I think has the ability to hit into middle America and really win them over.
That is correct. If you simply looked at the Electoral College map, if Joe Biden holds the states that Hillary won and simply flips Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, it's over. He wins.
Right.
And right now he's ahead in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. But in addition, he's also ahead in Florida and essentially tied in North Carolina, Texas, and Arizona. So there are a lot of multiple paths to victory. Kamala Harris helps him in all those states. And this really is going to come down to the 6 or 7 or 8 swing states come November. And I think that's one of the things that Joe Biden was thinking in selecting his vice president.
For sure, yeah. It's really interesting as we've been looking at things for the West Side Democratic headquarters. Not only, of course, we're helping Christy Smith and the other candidates here in California, but we've been looking around the country and trying to find the states that correlate with the Senate races and that will also help on the presidential. Obviously, Arizona is a big one, and Colorado is looking great, but we're really looking this week. The CDP has been focusing on North Carolina and trying to partner there. And just today we were calling for Cal Cunningham in North Carolina. So
besides the geographics, though, what should our strategy be on the demographics? Julie Rusk just made a really good point over in the chat. You know, Kamala's in her mid-50s, but, you know, Joe's, hell, he's older than I am. So for young people in America, what do we do? You know, we can go state by state and say, how do we motivate people? But the demographics are everywhere. And as I pointed out earlier, it's the people making decisions who won't be here to see what happens. And the people whose lives depend on what decisions are made may not be that excited to get out and vote. How do we excite them?
That's a great question, Kevin. What struck me as interesting about Joe Biden's speech was for folks that think he's moderate, he did actually put a lot of emphasis on climate change. That's not something you normally hear from moderate Democrats very much. And that is an issue that excites a lot of young people. If you just look at the polling, young people understand that climate change is going to affect them a lot more than it is Joe Biden. And Joe Biden understands that. And so I thought that was very good to emphasize climate change as one, not only in that speech, but he has actually a pretty darn good plan on climate change.
Yeah, I agree with the congressman on that. Climate change, and especially, the current conversation about systemic racism and racial inequity and criminal justice reform. Every young voter that I've engaged with here in my community is really invested in that, as well as gun reform. My district is home to one of the most recent school shootings before we went on COVID lockdown, sadly. And those young voters are motivated by that. But it's also, part of this big question is how we welcome young people into this party in a meaningful way. And I think that means, more than just, your college Dems and your high school Dem chapters, but really making a concerted effort to allow them positions of decision-making within the party itself, but get them on the platform committees and some of these important roles and provide that important training ground. It's one of the things that I've done as a state assembly member. I plan to continue once I'm in Congress. I want to do local leadership trainings and real meaningful in-office opportunities, not just, making copies and stuffing envelopes, but, opportunities to contribute, to have a voice, to have a seat at the table, and also to let young people know, we've taken, I'm Gen X, so I'm kind of like right there in that middle of what's happening right now. But I think we've kind of taken for granted that a lot of people go to positions of power and stay there a really, really long time. And what I've campaigned on is I don't want to do this job forever. I want to be a bridge. I know the really challenging and dynamic work that it's going to take to get us from where we are now as a party to a more progressive version and vision that I think a lot of our younger voters aspire to. So I need them in that process with me to help do that lift. And then I want to be able to carry the ball as far down the field as I can, plan on a semi-early decent retirement and have these young people ready to go. And that means we just all need to invest in developing their leadership potential and give them a seat at the table right now.
I want to go next to Dorothy Wright. She got a question.
Hi, Ted. There's been a lot of talk on TV and also in the progressive community about the transition. If Biden were to win, whether or not Trump would actually even accept any result, or is he going to throw the whole country into chaos? And he's got 50,000 people, I understand, trained to go to the polls to challenge voters. There's threats. He was on TV today saying that he's going to call out the military to the polling places. People are frightened there's actually going to be violence in our country if Trump doesn't easily win re-election. If there's, if he thinks he's going to lose, that he's going to cause chaos and there's going to be a lot of trouble. There's also been various scenarios about how he could throw this into the Congress, and that there's more Republican states than there are Democratic states, and each state only gets one vote, or all kinds of theories that have been going around. What do you think? Do you think it's going to be an orderly transition, or do you think that we need to be prepared?
Thank you, Dorothy, for your question. I think we should absolutely try to be as prepared as possible. So let me first address the issue that you raised about this potentially going to the House of Representatives. If no candidate reaches 270, or if there's a tie, or let's say there's some state that can't certify because of screw-ups with their elections, it would go to the House of Representatives, and it would be the new House that votes, except it's not individual members. It's actually the 50 state delegations. Right now, it is 22 states controlled by Democrats, 26 by Republicans, 2 are tied. So if it went to the House, nothing would have changed with those numbers, then the Republicans would likely vote up Donald Trump. So if we could flip 2 or 3 states, we could change that result. So I'm gonna give you some states. Alaska and Montana are represented by 1 member of Congress. If we flip Alaska and Montana, then we equalize the playing field. Our candidate in Alaska is Elise Galvin. She is slightly ahead right now of the Republican incumbent, Don Young, who's been there like 10,000 years. And then in Montana, that's a close race within the margin of error. Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Florida, we don't yet control the state delegation in terms of members of Congress, but we could flip those 3 states as well. So that's just something to think about. So if you want to support congressional candidates in Alaska, Montana, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Florida, that would be very helpful. And then in terms of deploying military and law enforcement to the polls, I frankly have no idea, first of all, why they would go there, what the reason is. They really have no mission. I don't actually think that's going to happen, but Donald Trump did say that tonight, so we have to push back and make sure it doesn't happen. And if people simply vote by mail and vote early, it actually makes a lot of these issues go away. In fact, we're going to come into special session, emergency session this Saturday to try to stop the post office sabotage. But if you simply just vote early, it really doesn't matter what they do to the post office. Your mail ballot will get counted. So we're just trying to get people to simply vote early if they're going to vote by mail. And if you're in a state that we have to request absentee ballot, you need to request it now, request it early.
I think what they're saying is that if there are absentee ballots, it will take a long time to count them. So if he's ahead after the election day, when the in-person ballot voting is counted, he could try to call into question the whole election. And there's a movement, I think, to try to get states to pass laws that they can at least prepare the ballots for scanning, as opposed to not even opening the envelopes until election day, or until the polls are closed. So I don't know how that's coming along. It's
right. So Donald Trump can say whatever he wants. However, the elections are controlled by the 50 states. Each of them have a Secretary of State, and there are laws within each of these states. So they'll simply follow the state laws of each state, and Donald Trump cannot change that. He can tweet, he can, contest the election or whatever he wants to do, but only they're going to follow the state laws of each of the states and how they count the ballots.
There's just fear about these Proud Boys and the Boogaloos and the Patriot Prayer and all these militia types who are heavily armed. And
we saw a little bit of that here in California's 25th around some polling stations, big trucks with the Trump flags waving, driving through. Fortunately for us, none of them actually stopped and intimidated people, but it's a concern that we have too, especially in some of our high desert communities, where we know that if people do wait, they will be standing in long lines because there will be, in LA County, we're doing this reduced number of vote centers. So, you know, what Ted said is so right on. We really, every time we pick up the phone to a voter, we want to be encouraging them, vote early. As soon as you get that ballot, you know, put it in that drop box, put it back in the mail, try to avoid those long lines on election day. And hopefully any of that, you know, unfortunate attempts at intimidation that might happen.
Great. Well, I want to bring in Kimball, someone who I think you know, Christy, from the 25th district.
Yeah, again, on this fourth night, I thank everybody for a wonderful discussion. You guys have been great. You're always great to us on the 25th, and Christy knows that you guys, when we come out and ask for help, you guys are always the first people in line. I really want to just reflect on a couple of things, just to echo with our Assemblywoman and soon-to-be future Congresswoman in November, what she said about that the convention was really all about reflecting America, the diversity in America, the different types of people in America, the real people in America. So I really want to kind of bring that home. I typically never watch conventions 4 days in a row, but I was able to kind of sit through all 4 days because I could relate to the normal people in the convention. I could relate to the people who look like me. I could relate to the people who look like people in my district. And as Christy Smith stated, this is a very diverse district here. And this convention was really reflective of what America looks like. So I'm looking forward to November, forward to working with all of you folks. And one last thought, I really appreciate our progressive brothers and sisters, Amar, our Mayor Kevin, for at least coming up and letting us know that you're here with us in the fight, because we're going to be victorious in November, not only from a presidential level, but the help that we receive from you guys in Congressional District 25. I'm going to be happy when these roads turn to blue again. So again, thank you all for all your help over the last couple of years.
Thanks, Kimball. I know that Julie Rusk said she had a question for the Congress member.
Sorry, I just wanted to hear a little more about how much we should be concerned about this post office situation. And I don't know, I'm finding it really surreal that we have to think about having a voting plan. It's just like, wow. So is this something we should really be focused on, or do you guys kind of have it covered?
No, we need to continue to be concerned about the post office. So because of everything that Democrats have been doing, the Postmaster General DeJoy did issue a statement saying he was going to suspend his initiatives till after the election. So that's a partial victory. He's not going to make things worse. What we're trying to do is get him to restore the damage he's already done. So that's going to be the purpose of hearings that are going to happen in the next few days. In addition, I'm a former prosecutor. I took a look at the federal law, and it looks pretty clear to me. 18 U.S.C. Section 1701 says it is illegal to willfully slow down mail delivery. And 18 U.S.C. Section 595 says that it is illegal to use your official authority to interfere in elections. So Postmaster General DeJoy is taking these sweeping policy changes to slow down mail delivery and affect mail-in balloting. Then to me, that's a violation of both statutes. That's why Representative Hakeem Jeffries and I essentially made a criminal referral this past Monday to the FBI, asking them to investigate the Postmaster General as well as the Board of Governors. So hopefully we'll get some results from that. And then this Saturday, we're going to vote on funding for the post office, as well as legislation that says that the standards of delivery have to be the same as they were at the beginning of this year. And this is not even a partisan issue. Ohio Senator Portman recently said he's going to co-author the funding bill of $25 billion to the post office because he knows this is affecting Americans in rural areas, affecting people who need prescription drugs, people who need their Social Security checks. So this is having a huge effect to a lot of Americans. So we have to stay vigilant on the post office. And I think that with the continual pressure, we can hopefully get Louis DeJoy to restore some of the changes he's already made.
Yeah, because I would just say I've noticed a slowdown in mail, and that's been happening for a while, but I really had no sense until the last couple of weeks that this was part of a concerted effort in the way we've begun to learn about that. So I guess it's just one of those things that's been so stunning. And as we're thinking about where to put our energy and where to encourage people to make calls and really advocate, it sounds like this is still something that's very important, because
yes,
it could really affect the election. I mean, bottom line.
It could. Now, at the end of the day, if you vote by mail early, your ballot will get counted. I mean, there's only
right. Understood.
Even if you put in all the delays,
people
there's only
like
so
us
much
are
you can do.
right. So people like, we'll do that and figure that out and have a voting plan and all that. But even this concept of a voting plan to me is just like, whoa, this is pretty. I mean, should we be looking at setting things up where we help people to do this? Is this like to vote early, and is this part of where our organizing and focus should be?
Absolutely. That's how we win. We need everyone who supports Democrats to do the one thing that they have to do, which is to vote. And so we have to tell people to vote by mail early if they want to do that. And if they're going to vote in person, they need to be prepared for the possibility of long lines. So they need to bring a meal or a lawn chair or a board game or whatever it is that allow them to cast that vote. And so we absolutely have to prepare people to overcome obstacles to voting, because there just is going to be some obstacles to voting for some people come this November.
Right.
Wow.
So let's go to our Region 12 Director and the Chair of the Coalition for Economic Survival, the great Larry Gross, who has a question.
Thanks, John. Actually, Executive Director. That Dorothy Reich, I tell you, like minds think alike. So I wanted to expand on Dorothy's question. But first, I did want to say, as Region 12 Director of the California Democratic Party, which most of you on this call are in, we have the proud distinction of having a delegate on the ticket. So Kamala Harris is a delegate of Region 12, and so I'm very proud that I represent the Vice President-to-be. And I also wanted to say, so I was a Bernie delegate, and now I'm a Berner for Biden. And for us progressives, look, the fight is only beginning. I feel extremely optimistic. I thought the convention was great. I say that this in no way ends our fight for Medicare for all, for a Green New Deal, for housing as a human right. All it means is that, we're going to be there on January 21st, 2021. And our fight is not only going to continue, it's going to accelerate, and we have a better chance of winning these issues with Biden and Harris is in office. But I did want to say, I think that Dorothy and I were at the same meeting. We were at the Progressive Democrats of America meeting today. And Tom Hartman, the progressive radio commentator, was on there. And he was sort of setting almost what was a doomsday scenario. He said he's been following all the Trumpites and the QAnon people online, and he painted a very, very scary, grim picture of what happened after the election. Essentially, that what we saw with Gore Bush, with Roger Stone and his legislative aides in suits banging on the windows as they counted chads and stuff, will be compared to what we're going to see after this election. And he talked about, militias arming, Nazis in streets. I mean, really dark day. And I hope that's not the case. But, we weren't prepared for that with Gore and Bush. we need to be prepared for that this time. And I just hope that the Democratic leadership is really taking that possibility seriously and really strategizing on how we respond to that if we have to. Hopefully we don't, but we might.
No, those are absolute concerns that we need to be preparing for. And so on the House Judiciary Committee, a number of us have had meetings with Professor Tribe and other experts on the Constitution as to things that the president could do or the speaker could do and others, and we're looking at all the various options. But the Constitution is pretty clear that if no one reaches 270 votes, it does in fact go to the House of Representatives. And it's going to be the new House that's going to vote on it. So it is quite important to try to flip the congressional state delegations of Alaska, Montana, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Florida, because that's sort of going to be the next step. If you're talking about sort of, violence on the streets, that's just something that, it's hard to prepare for that. So there's really not much you can do if that's going to happen. But what I do know happened is millions and millions and millions of people turned out and protested for days after George Floyd was murdered. And they were not stopped by law enforcement or by the National Guard or by anything else Trump threw at them. You kept seeing people show up. In fact, people showed up in even greater numbers when Trump tried to use a heavy hand of government to try to suppress their voices. And so I think if the American public saw Trump trying to cheat after November 3rd, I think people would actually, on our side, take to the streets as well.
Yeah. Janice, do you have a question?
Yeah, Representative Lieu. So I don't think we could have anybody who we can trust more to do everything to push back against all of this nonsense than you are. If anybody didn't see a representative on the floor of Congress playing the excruciating audio of those crying children and babies that were in detention and constantly being admonished that he wasn't allowed to play it, and nevertheless persisting. It's a good thing that they may underestimate what they're up against with you. There's an additional wrinkle to this sabotage of the post office that many of us have communicated with you for some years, our interest in postal banking as a way to shore up the post office as they were gradually closing offices over the years. A few years ago before Trump came in, the infrastructure existed that we could have served all the underbanked with a safe, secure postal system and infuse money that would have shored up its finances. The latest thing that happened today, I understand, is that JP Morgan Chase is in discussions to do postal banking, to get a contract to do postal banking. So it's, as I said, another one of these sort of reverse bizarro world versions of what we thought of as postal public banking could be another smash and grab privatization. Have you heard anything about that? And I just hope that when you have those hearings that could be dealt with as well. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for raising this year postal banking. I haven't heard a lot discussed recently about it because what we're just trying to do is get the post office to do its job right now, which is to deliver mail and packages on time. By the way, I just want to comment on presenting the audio tape of their children who were crying. And you should know that when I was doing it, there two things. First of all, the person who was on top of the podium trying to shut me down, her name is Karen Hando.
Karen!
She lost her election to Lucy McBath in Georgia. And now she's trying to run against Lucy. They actually use a clip from that. Lucy used it in my clip in her advertising. So that was sort of interesting. But the second thing is, towards the end, they actually, the Sergeant Arms person came up to me and basically sort of in a nice way said, essentially, we're going to physically remove you. And so that's when I basically, agreed to stop it. And then the next week, I remember I was walking in the hallway and about to enter the floor, and this sort of big Sergeant Arms person comes up to me and he says, "You broke the rules last week." And then he pauses and he looks at me and he says, but it had to be done. So that was sort
Good
of
trouble. You were doing a good trouble. Good for you. Thank you.
yeah, sure.
And of course, that woman's name was Karen. I mean,
I just want to say that we are all so honored to be represented by you, Congressman Lieu.
That's 100%.
Every day I wake up and I'm glad that you're my congressman. I think about you a lot. I think about your chief of staff who does such a great job for all of us, and your local staff who helped so many of us with our issues with SBA loans and unemployment checks and everything. And we are just so very fortunate to have you representing us.
Oh, thank you for those kind words, Dorothy. And by the way, as some of you may know, as a member of Congress, you're dealing with 1,000 issues, and sometimes it takes a constituent to come up to you and tell you about an issue. And so no one really was thinking about bail reform a few years ago, and Dorothy came up to me and said, have you ever looked at this issue? And I honestly hadn't looked into it and realized what a problem it was. So next month, we're going to reintroduce the bail reform legislation. And so we're going to just keep pushing that issue. And I know that with every passing year, we get closer to getting it done at a national level.
Thank you.
Well, we really appreciate everyone your time tonight. And before you guys go, wanted to make sure everybody knew about the big event that we're doing for Christy and the other 6 incumbent members who we flipped last time around. We're doing the big Save the 7 fundraiser event with the Westside Democratic headquarters. So actually Dami, I mean, is the one who really did all the legwork to put that together, but we're really excited. And Dami put the link in the chat so you can take a look really quick. I'll post it again. But
yeah, we're going to have Representative Schiff speaking, and we're going to have all the 7 flip district members. And Christy, we're going to be having her to try and get her district back. You all come, and there's probably going to be some more events coming with some other people too. So we're keeping busy.
I think that we need to think about what Ted told us about the states that we need to flip in order to be sure, in case it gets on to the Congress, that House of Representatives, that we are sure that Joe Biden will be elected. So maybe we need to talk about that offline, the people, the West Side headquarters people.
All right, well,
we're working on it, Dorothy. We're working on it. Don't worry. We're busy.
I have a question really quick. I know you said that there were some Senate seats that needed to flip. Did you, could you list what Senate seats need to be flipped as well, Congressman Lieu?
Sure, I'll tell you the states where I think we could win. So we're doing very well in Arizona. Our candidate Mark Kelly is ahead. We're actually ahead in North Carolina. Cunningham is doing quite well against Senator Tillis. We are ahead in Colorado. We also have to hold Alabama. So that's Doug Jones. We're ahead in Maine. So Sarah Gideon is doing quite well. So those are pretty good paths. And then Montana we're sort of even. That's a hard state. And then we actually have a shot in Alaska. It's sort of interesting. No one really thinks about Alaska, but people there do seem sort of sick and tired of Donald Trump. And so we have a shot there as well to flip not only the member of Congress, but also the senator as well.
Thank you.
Oh, we do have a shot in Kentucky, hard, but I think we do have a shot. And South Carolina as well.
Graham.
Yeah, the Senate picture, I mean, Ted, I'm sure you've been watching it as closely as I have, but I mean, it started off, the last when I did that presentation, you were on the line, right? And I did the presentation about where the Senate map looked like. And I mean, it's basically moved like 2 seats in our direction since then. I mean, the polling is really looking good. And I feel like the Biden-Harris ticket is really solid for helping us to win the Senate back. So
I agree.
We're really well positioned in that regard. So I believe everybody here got an email, but I also, the club just announced that the Westside Democratic headquarters now has in our possession Biden-Harris yard signs. So all you have to do is, we went ahead as soon as Kamala's name was picked, we called up the printers, we got them ready to go. So they'll be here this weekend, and you can buy one through Act Blue in the email that I just sent out for $20, and we will arrange to have it dropped off at your house or something like that. So that's the big that big happy news at the end. We're going to show a big display of Biden-Harris support throughout the whole West Side, and we're going to elect this team, and we're all together going to, as Amar said, we're going to elect Biden and then challenge Biden and eventually succeed Biden. And whether that's in 4 or 8 years, we're eventually going to move past this moment. And I think that Joe Biden will be the great transitional figure to get us out of this horrible moment that we're in and take us to the point where we can restart the conversation about what it means to be an American and a progressive American at that. And I'm really excited with this whole team. You all know the West Side Democratic headquarters. We're going to be doing a lot of work. Democrats kicking ass, as Dommy's shirt says. And we're going to win this election. I'm feeling really good about it after the convention this week. And I'm a little burnt out. I can't do 4 more nights next week to react to the Republican convention. But, you all know, you can imagine what my reaction is going to be. It'll be a little bit worse than this one. Amy Bishop has a good point. So we've got our friends at the Climate Hawks Vote are putting together a big protest on Saturday around the country at every local post office. You can go, we put it on our Facebook page. If you want to take a look on our Facebook page, every local post office they'll be socially distanced. Obviously, everyone's going to be distanced and wearing a mask. We're all regular people of science here. We're not idiots, but we got to make our voices heard on this, because if we can't mail our votes in, we're not going to be able to win the election.
What day is that?
It's Saturday. And
John, we have one more thing too. We have Weekend of Action for Christy over here. So we got to be calling.
And for people who are interested in the environment, on Sunday we're having a Zoom call with Henry Stern at 3 o'clock. I can send you the link, John, if you want to put it up someplace. Because there's a lot of bad environmental legislation being passed and a lot of good environmental legislation not being passed. We want to talk about that.
We'll post it for sure. Okay, and then next week I did mention how I was going to be burnt out for next week, but we do have that. Just put in the comments. Our old friend Barack Obama, who joined us. I don't know. Some of you were here 2 nights ago when Barack Obama joined us. But they're hosting the Tune Out Fascism Streamathon for Democracy on the night right during President Trump's speech. We want to get rid of the ratings for the RNC, and we're going to tune into our friend here, number 44. Tune out.
Hello, everybody.
Here he is, Obama.
I just want to make sure that next week. How have you guys liked the convention so far?
Well, Mr. President, I thought your speech was really, really great yesterday. And
thank you. I decided to put on a T-shirt selling my brand and a jacket so I look like everybody else in Santa Monica.
That's
dyed
right.
My hair. And hey, Christy Smith, tell Andrew Tabin I said hello. That kid's a good kid. I want to let me be clear. What we're going to do next week is we're going to get some of the most inspiring people. I would love, Ted Lieu, I would love you to come on and do some live tweeting, because your Twitter feed is popping. That's what the kids say. And we're going to have some musicians, some comedians. We're going to have a tribute to Emmett Till. And we're going to tune out the fascism and tune into democracy. We're partnering with Sea Change PAC, with Field Team 6, with Vote Plan, and that's what we're talking about, is teaching people how to make a plan that walks them through right there where they're in their life to actually casting a vote on or before Election Day. Because for some people, especially if you're 18-year-olds to 22-year-olds, they're the most registered group. But they're also the group that participates the least in our elections. Because when you're that young, anything that happens in your life interrupts going to vote because you've never done it before. So if you make them have a plan, just like our parents have been teaching them how to have a plan for everything else, where parents have been scheduling their lives all beforehand, they're more likely to follow through. It's something we learned on my campaign in 2008 by asking people 3 simple questions. What time are you going to vote? Where are you going to go, coming from when you're going to vote, and what are you doing just before you go vote? You can raise the actual likelihood of them going to vote by 9.1 percentage points. This is actual science. This is the science that you use to actually win elections.
There you go. You heard it from the president. So check out his event. And where can we find out the information about the Streamathon?
We'll be sending out, I'll send you an email, John, so you can send it out to everybody. It's going to be posted on Mobilize, and then you're going to be able to tune right in on Facebook, on Twitch. You know, that all these newfangled things that the kids are doing, we're going to reach them right where they are.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. President, for joining us. Thank you to all of our guests, Congressman Lieu, Christy Smith, Amar, Shergill, Mayor McKeown, Dami, Ed. Thanks, everybody. We've got a lot of great events coming up to Santa Monica Dems, including our local elections and endorsements coming up. And we got all the GOTV. We're going to get Joe Biden and Kamala Harris elected and get rid of Donald Trump.
Steve Bannon's going to jail. Steve Bannon is going to jail.
That's right.
Celebrate.